Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Samantha Politics. This is a special episode focusing on what's going on with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So we're not in our usual spot, and I apologize for that. But this is obviously an incredibly important thing happening on the world stage, and we needed to cover it. We have three amazing Ukrainian and Polish guests waiting in the wings to talk about what's going on the ground there and what you can do to help. But first, let's go over what exactly is going on right now. I also want to just tell you, as a trigger warning, there are going to be some upsetting images here, and the F word may be used a fair amount, as that happens to be the favorite Ukrainian word right now to protest. It's kind of mine right now too. So if you do have kids watching, just please be warned that there are some upsetting images here and that there may be curse words used. Also, if you like this type of content, please support us on Patreon, and we'll post that in the chat. But let's get down to the news. What is the latest? So on our show 3 weeks ago, we had two guests who were hypothesizing, what exactly was Russia doing? Were they going to invade Ukraine? Or was this, as one guest put it, strategic ambiguity that was geared toward getting the West to do what Russia wanted? I, as many other people, were hoping that this was some sort of exercise in strategic ambiguity and persuasion, and that Russia was just using this as a bargaining chip to get what he wanted from the West. Unfortunately, that did not happen. And the absolute worst that I think many of us couldn't even imagine has happened. I thought that even if Russia did invade, we might see a limited incursion into the Donbas region where there are a lot of ethnic Russians. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that we would see Russia invade and go to the heart of Ukraine, the capital, Kiev. Staggering. This is the biggest invasion since World War II on European soil, and it's incredibly, incredibly serious. So if we can look at the map, Zach, you can throw up that map, we can see how Russia is invading on three different fronts, from the top, from the east, and from the south, which makes it obviously incredibly difficult to counter them. This is why the border with Poland, which is on the other side of the country, is incredibly important, but we'll get to that later. What is the latest with what's going on? So Russia has intensified its attacks on key Ukrainian cities. Hundreds of people are pronounced or feared dead in the southern port of Mariupol after sustained shelling. There's also been Russia battling for control of Kherson. However, the mayor is saying that it's still held by Ukrainian forces. There have also been reports of rocket fire and airstrikes in Kharkiv, where Russian paratroopers have landed. They've also attacked the main television tower in Kiev and killed an entire family. It's just incredibly sad seeing pictures of lifeless bodies on the ground for really no reason. And some of those rockets even hit a site that were memorializing people killed in the Holocaust. Let that land for a second. There have also been two apartment complexes north of Kiev that have been struck, and a building in Kharkiv. Zach, let's see some footage of the bombings.
Ох ты, ёперный банан. Ух.
Это там взрывается?
Ну, газовая заправка.
Да.
Бегом, бегом. Блядь. Конечно же. Пизда, блядь. Блядь! Ксения, быстро! Сука, пидоры, блядь! Пидоры, блядь! Сука, пожилым, блядь, стреляют, блядь.
Кто тут русский мир ждал с флагом России на площади? Вы этого хотели, да? Мы вас предупреждали. Это плохая затея. Много раненых. Двухсотых пока не видно.
You can see the level of destruction is unbelievably staggering. I think that one video that really strikes me is the woman in her apartment just watching, and all of a sudden, this bomb just hitting this building really right in front of her, which is clearly a residential building. Also, we have other sources on the ground that are giving us information about what's going on in this suburban area of Kiev. Apparently, the Russians blew up the Chloe and Silpo gas stations and warehouses. There's also civilian casualties in that area after mortar shelling and days of machine gun fire. There's also been a Russian convoy of 46 units, but the Ukrainian army turned them into a corridor of 30. And Gostomel is also no longer under Ukrainian control. There are active, fierce battles for Bucha near Kiev and restlessness in Borodyanka and 5 other towns. Russia also bombed, wait for this, a private maternity hospital 10 kilometers away, because that's really a threat. Women that are having children and little babies, that's really a threat. And 30 Russian helicopters have landed in Berezivka, and that was as of 2 days ago. The numbers of casualties are unclear. Russia and Ukraine have both said that they've killed thousands of opposing troops. Moscow is saying 500 of its soldiers have been killed. Ukraine is saying about 2,000 civilians have died, but it's incredibly hard to really get those numbers because people have to be on the ground counting casualties. And right now, the focus is on, at least in Ukraine, trying to repel Russia. A lot of the casualties are caused by explosive weapons with a wide impact area, including artillery and rocket systems, as well as airstrikes. Something else that's staggering is that there were many Russian soldiers that were brought in that didn't realize they were going to invade Ukraine. There are some really sad text messages of Russian soldiers who are rookies, who are young men, texting their moms and saying, "Mom, uh-oh, we thought we were here for military training exercises, which is a normal part of being in the military. And now they're telling us we are going into Ukraine and we're supposed to go kill people." So, I think what's really incredibly sad here is that there's incredible loss of life from also all these Russian troops that some don't even want to be there, which is also just incredibly sad. There's some reports of the EU offering Russian soldiers money and papers to work in the EU if they put down their arms. And the Ukrainian government has offered full amnesty to Russian troops who do lay down their arms. Something else that's been interesting within this whole thing is that Vladimir Zelensky has kind of emerged as this unlikely hero. He didn't have huge support of the Ukrainian people, from what I understand, when he was elected, mainly because he played a president on television, but he didn't actually have political experience. And he was also a comedian. He has really stepped up as the man of the moment in this, in terms of prompting European sanctions, in terms of being a figurehead and a leader, an incredibly strong leader for this country, which I think some people weren't necessarily expecting. Okay, so what has been the response so far from the international community? Well, the EU, in a watershed moment, decided to provide $500 million in arms and aid to the Ukrainian military. Now, this normally doesn't happen because there's usually a block on using the budget to fund operations with military or defense implications. However, there's an off-budget kind of fund called the European Peace Facility, which is where they pulled the money from. But this is the first time ever that the EU has financed the purchasing and delivery of weapons and other equipment to a country that is under attack, which again is a watershed. And what reports are saying is they are not giving them Molotov cocktails. They are giving Ukraine serious weaponry, rocket-propelled grenades, and serious military equipment. We also have major crippling sanctions on Russia from the EU and also the United States. Those started with sanctions of President Putin and his foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov. They have gone on and gotten bigger, where essentially the EU has decided to paralyze the assets of Russia's central bank. This is incredibly huge because it makes it impossible for the Russian central bank to liquidate assets. they also can't do any business with other countries. So they're isolating it from the global financial system. And many Russians are upset because they can no longer use Apple Pay. So these sanctions have crushed the Russian economy. The ruble has absolutely plunged in terms of its value, and sanctions are already starting to have an effect on the Russian people. Now, some people are saying that the point of this is not just it's to inspire people to rise up and protest against Putin. What people are saying, and we're going to hear more from our guests, is that a lot of Russians don't support this war. They are not behind this. And so, with the crippling sanctions and the effect that it's going to have on the Russian economy and ordinary people, hopefully this will do something. There has been a reticence to get involved from a larger scale. So, one thing, there's a petition going around about having NATO enforce a no-fly zone above Ukraine, which would be incredibly valuable because a lot of what's happening are shelling and airstrikes. However, the reason that the US and NATO have not done this is because you have to enforce a no-fly zone. And so if Russian planes fire back, we're now in a world war. And that's why I think that the US and NATO have been reticent to get involved from a quote unquote boots on the ground. The US has also provided military equipment. The US and the EU have now also banned flights from their airspace from Russia. So Russians can no longer fly to New York City. They cannot fly to Paris. They have banned Russia from the airplace. And even FIFA has banned soccer games. And everybody knows how much Europeans like soccer, so that's a big hit. We also had the State of the Union last night from President Biden, where he said Putin thought he could roll into Ukraine and the world would roll over. Instead, he met a wall of strength he never imagined. He met the Ukrainian people. So that's what I think has been really striking about this, is that a lot of people didn't think that the Ukrainians would last. In our last show, we talked about how much the Russian military outsizes the Ukrainian military. I can't even remember the number, by like 100 times. And the fact that the Ukrainian military is still fighting is unbelievable. The resilience and the resolve of the Ukrainian people has been just tremendous and incredibly inspiring. Also, there's been a lot of use of the word fuck. I wanted to show this video. I didn't, but Russia said in peace talks it would withdraw from Ukraine once Ukraine restores democratic order, which is obviously ridiculous, because how is Ukraine going to restore democratic order when Russia are the people who disrupted the democratic order? So Ukrainian MP Oleksiy Gondroshenko responded to Foreign Minister Lavrov's statement about restoring democratic order by saying, "Fuck you, Lavrov." There was also a very heroic report of 11 Ukrainian military on an island. A Russian tanker was approaching, and the Russian tanker said, "We are approaching, put down their arms." And they said, "Fuck you, Russian warship," and they were all killed. Incredible amount of defiance on behalf of the Ukrainian people. The Ukrainian government is also offering 250 Ukrainian currency to every soldier who demolishes a Russian tank, and 5 million rubles to Russians who lay down their arms. So, Zach, let's see some of the protest stuff. So I also love something else that the Ukrainians have done, which is they have swapped out street signs within Ukraine to confuse Russian troops. This is also really interesting because the Czechs did this in the Prague Spring in 1968 when the Russians rolled in. They swapped the street signs. They've been a little more expletive on these street signs. So if we see that image of the street signs, it says, "Go fuck yourself again, and go fuck yourself back in Russia." That's what the translated signs said. And this is an officially sanctioned thing by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, who has called on civilians to remove those street signs that may help the Russians. There have been protests in major cities across the world: Berlin, Prague, the White House. There's also been a huge refugee flow. It is reported now that over 1 million people have fled Ukraine, mostly to Poland, but also to other neighboring countries like Romania and Moldova. So that is the latest update. But now I want to bring you somebody who's on the ground right now in Ukraine, an incredibly amazing man who agreed to come on the show tonight. And I'm so thankful that he is here. Vasil is a partner at CFC Big Ideas, a Kiev-based strategic communications company. He has over 15 years of experience advising clients on corporate communications. He's also a co-founder of the Ukraine Crisis Media Center, which was a media NGO set up in March of 2014 when Russia first invaded Crimea to amplify Ukraine's voice internationally. The Ukraine Crisis Media Center is all about also fending off the tremendous amount of Russian disinformation that's spread all over the world, not just in Ukraine and Russia. He also co-founded the Professional Government Association, an umbrella organization which united alumni of Western universities in Ukraine with the goal of mobilizing talent for economic and government reforms. He was the head of it in 2015. He has an MSc in Politics of the World Economy from the London School of Economics and an MA and a BA in International Relations from Kiev National Shevchenko University at the Institute of International Relations. Vasil, welcome to the show.
Amanda, thanks for bringing.
Oh, trying to get you into the stream.
Yes, I'm back. Happy to be here.
Hi. Thank you so much. I can't imagine the stress and the duress that you're under right now. Can you explain a little bit about, where are you without revealing your exact location? What's going on in your world?
Look, I live in Kiev, and I woke up with my wife very early in the morning on the 24th of February because we heard explosions. That was around 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:30 in the morning. Those were Russian missiles which hit the military targets. They hit the airport as well as the central command office, some military bases. So we heard those explosions. We woke up. We woke our kids up. I have a son who is 5. My daughter is 18. We quickly packed. We jumped into the car and started living in the city. It was already a little bit too late, as Kiev had 3 million people, and everybody was trying to leave. Many cars were actually congested. There was huge congestion on the way out. We ended up spending 12 hours in a traffic jam, and we couldn't leave the city. We just then figured that we would stay on the outskirts of Kiev at our friend's house. So we stayed there. Most of the night we spent in the basement because we heard explosions. There were some, so there was some fighting going on. We didn't know much what was happening. Next day, we were trying to find fuel in the city. It wasn't easy, and we decided to move a little bit further away to another house of our friends. At that night, actually, we heard an explosion because we were in close vicinity to Vasilkiv, which is a place of a military airport, and this is where the Russian airborne troops wanted to parachute. But that plane was shot down by Ukrainian armed forces, and we heard the explosion. So we left that morning on Saturday, and we traveled to my hometown, which is about 4 kilometers southwest of Kiev. It's still relatively calm here. We do get sirens pretty much very often, so we rushed to the basement. There were some missiles sent into the military airports and also some civilian airports in kind of the neighborhood. But apart from that, it's been relatively calm here.
Well, I'm so sorry for what you're going through. I can't imagine just, waking up in your city where you live and hearing explosions, and then just trying to get out. You did say that you were able to get potentially some of your family to Romania. Is that true?
Yes, that's true. We made this decision the day before yesterday. I evacuated my family and my kids to Romania. We traveled to the cross checkpoint outside of Chernivtsi, which is in southwestern part of Ukraine. And they cross the border on foot. There are huge lines of cars. People spend sometimes 2 days to cross the border. That is now happening on all the borders. So on foot is the fastest way. And I had my friend's family who met them on the other side and took them to their house. So they are now there, and they will stay there for the time being. I got back to my parents' place, and I just watching the situation and what's going on today. Is, by the way, is probably the worst day in terms of the damage which has been inflicted to civilians. Kharkiv was under heavy multiple rocket launchers the whole day. As of yesterday, there were 80 residential buildings destroyed. I think it's now doubled as of today. Half of Chernihiv in the north is destroyed. Kherson in the south was under heavy artillery for the whole day. It's really unbelievable of how much damage is being done to the Ukrainian people. Having said that, I have a feeling as if we Ukrainians are being born again, and there is a real birth of a nation in the country because people are united as never. Our resistance is fierce, as you mentioned in your introduction. The Russian army is, of course, exceeding all the capabilities of the Ukrainian army, but the resistance they have seen here is unbelievable. They plan to capture Kiev in less than 2 days, and it's a week later, and we keep on fighting. And many people, volunteers, joining the armed forces, taking up the guns, and just out there. People are united. They just go out on the streets. Farmers are stealing tanks. It just people are fearless. I have a feeling like that, and this is really the support that you get. I get like 20-30 calls per day, people having different requests, helping somebody find a place where to stay, arranging the supply of medicine to somebody in need, finding contacts in the neighboring countries of people who can host them. I mean, different kind of requests, lots of media requests to give them information about what's going on here. I keep in touch with my contacts who are still in Kiev. People are spending lots of time in bomb shelters. This is barbarian what's going on. As you mentioned, they launched an attack on a maternity house, and also a children's hospital was bombed in the center of Kiev. This is barbarian what's going on, and the large exodus of people from Ukraine. Europe has seen something like that in the Balkan wars, but the speed of this is so high. Then in 2 weeks from now, it's going to exceed it by many times. This is going to cause a humanitarian crisis in the entire Eastern Europe, and this is already this is so devastating for so many people here.
So it's so unbelievable. And so it seems like from what you're talking about that they're really not trying to strike Ukrainian military targets. I mean, if they're bombing children's hospitals and maternity hospitals, like, is that aimed at a military target? It seems like it's pretty aimless shelling at this point.
You see, that's a problem because they didn't plan all the logistics, which would last, the attack would last for so long. Since they cannot really resist the army, their tool is now to intimidate civilian population and create chaos and create the whole havoc. So that basically that Kiev, seeing what's happening in Kharkiv and other cities, would surrender, being under threat and intimidated by a potential similar attacks. So this is extremely dirty tactics, which is being used against the people. Nevertheless, I just have a feeling we stay strong, we stay angry, and we are fighting back.
So Vasil, you stayed. You decided to stay.
No. I moved out of the capital and moved to my hometown. So this is where I'm staying right now, and then that actually allows me to be able to do all the communications work as well as engaged with different stakeholders outside of Ukraine who are now assisting the country. In Kiev, it's very difficult to work at the moment. I know that many people, you just have to move to basement, to bomb shelters all the time. And it's now also very dangerous to move around the city as people get into the crossfire and they get killed. Look, this is really unbelievable. We all were kind of discussing as what this strategic ambiguity can mean and what Russia is trying to do. Is it just a leverage in the negotiations? And including myself, I didn't believe that he would dare to start an all-out war against Ukraine. I had a feeling that he would try to expand the influence in Donetsk and Luhansk and capture Mariupol and Kramatorsk and some other cities in that place, and that would be the war. But it started from all sides, and it's really, it's unbelievable what's going on here.
It is unbelievable. So in terms of, you also work on Russian disinformation. What kind of Russian disinformation are you seeing with regards to this war?
Oh, look, it's now so massive that it's even difficult, like, to give you a full account of that. Well, naturally, the information that Russian media is providing to the domestic audience has been extremely twisted. They defined the invasion into Ukraine as a special military operation, and they made the statement that they are not targeting civilians. They're all trying to get rid of the Nazi administration in Ukraine, which is a totally manufactured story. And
Especially considering the
you know,
president's Jewish.
yeah,
So,
yeah, he's Jewish and he's Russian speaking,
what?
yes, and our Minister of Defense is also Jewish and he's also Russian speaking. This is so ridiculous to be a ridiculous claim, but that's the tactic they are using. A lot of people in Russia, they are still scared. I have many Russian friends, and you know what? The only messages I got were from the Russians who live in the US or the UK. Everybody in Russia is silent. I didn't get a single message, though I've
Really?
known those people from the times when I studied in London, from the times when I studied in Sweden. So I've known those people, and nobody dares to
So you
contact
think
me.
it's because they're terrified?
Well, they may be terrified. They don't understand what's going on, and
Mm.
and you see the whole idea is Putin puts it as if he's defending the country. He explains that it's actually the NATO which is invading Russia, and he is just protecting. So this is something he's doing preventively to actually avoid a further, attack of NATO, which is, just an invented, manufactured story. And apparently now there is a great deal of disinformation and fake news which Russian military is using in Ukraine. There was a report today on all the news channels, and basically now we have a single news channel in Ukraine which is warning about deep fake video which we're going to be seeing on the Russian TV as if President Zelensky is surrendering. And the other news channels, our news channel is saying that this is going to be fake, a deep fake, which will look very authentic because the technology today allows actually to create some of those videos. So we should not be trusting it. Ukraine is not surrendering and will never surrender, and we have to keep on fighting. And that's a message which is now being distributed through the official news channels. But of course, apparently there's lots of other tactics which are being used to intimidate those people in the armed forces that, look, you are now surrounded, there is no way out, you better give up them arms, and etc. But this is kind of done at this period of time. I think Ukrainians are being quite resilient. They keep on fighting, and the spirit is very high, and the morale is very high, and this is very important because we are fighting for our land. They didn't expect Kharkiv to be so strong. Kharkiv is a big city. It's 1.5 million people. It's primarily Russian speaking, but they underestimated Kharkiv. Kharkiv is a very patriotic Ukrainian city, and now being shelled so indiscriminately, I think Russia lost Ukraine forever. No matter what's the outcome of this going to happen, but for many generations to come, Russia will be an enemy, and they will never get the hearts and minds of the Ukrainian people. It's gone. It's lost. We will always remember that, and we will never forgive it.
It's really powerful that Russia is now an enemy of Ukraine. I mean, it is a absolute enemy, and that desecrating civilians. And I mean, and this is what the other thing that I find like slightly bizarre about Putin is that he's now isolated Ukraine from ever being a partner, right? If he doesn't take it over, he's also isolated the international community entirely in terms of made everyone hate him, and he's made countries that haven't joined NATO terrified. Now they want to join NATO. So in terms of him, trying to use this as a vehicle to get Ukraine not to join NATO, it's actually going in the opposite direction, which is why I find it. I mean, what are your thoughts on like why he decided to do this?
You see, everybody analyzed Putin as a rational player, but it
Mm.
turned out that he was Vlad the Mad, as Gideon Rahman put it in his Financial Times column. So he's Vlad the Mad. The damage that he's done to the Russian economy
What does Vlad Zamat mean?
it's Vladimir the Mad. Vlad is kind of a shortened name for his
Oh, okay,
name.
okay.
So it's so basically, he's gone totally nuts, and the sanctions which are now being imposed, and the unity of the free world, but also the unity of the world. Today there was a uh, UN resolution which was approved today. 141 countries have recognized and approved the resolution condemning the Russian aggression and demanding the withdrawal of the Russian troops. 141 countries. Only 5 countries have not supported that, and about 35 countries which abstain. There is a world coalition against Putin. He's been kicked out of all the international forums. All Western companies are divesting from Russia. Everybody is quitting anything which has to do with Russia. Russia is going to be turned into a pariah state. These sanctions will not be reversed very quickly. They are long lasting. And the Russian people are going to be living with that for many, many years. They cannot fly anywhere. All the airspace is now banned. Strict visas will be introduced, and people will be just isolated. They are living in that country. And this is really insane. Why would he do that? What kind of a history and legacy he wants to leave behind him? I'm really hoping for his inner circle to basically kill him. We've seen it in the past, and I'm really hopeful that that's what's going to happen. I know that he's hiding somewhere in isolation in the Ural Mountains because he's really paranoid about it. But look, how much longer Russian people are going to be tolerating that? This is, we Ukrainians, we call it deputinization. We have to rid Russia of Putin, because Putin is actually making the lives of many Russians miserable. They are being just, people are going to be spitting into their faces wherever they go, just because of them being Russian. This is so much shame that he's brought to the Russian people, and Ukrainians will never forget it.
Right. And for what? For power? I mean, for it almost seems like it's like this land grab seems like something out of like, I don't know, like a history book. It's like,
Samantha, I've seen it in the movies many times, but now my life is a movie, and it's unfathomable. It's so difficult to believe. The one day before the bombing, before it all started, I was discussing with my colleague at work. Will Russians will really do it? Where is safer to be, in what part of the city, outside of the city? So, but we still would not believe it to the last, moment when we woke up in the morning and we heard the explosions and we learned that was already an attack. And very few people actually left. I know some people kind of left Kiev a week before that. Some flew abroad. Some kind of moved to the western part of Ukraine, but not many, because nobody really could fully imagine that would happen.
It's unbelievable. So, in terms of what your thoughts about the international community, what do you want to see happen in terms of the international community? I mean, we've talked about military aid, we've talked about sanctions. What do you want to see in terms of the help that the international community can provide? What do you need right now?
Well, we need humanitarian aid, we need financial aid, and we need military aid. This is what we need really badly. And we need heavy sanctions on Russia, very heavy. They have to be rolled out quicker. We don't have to wait. This is already, the worst is happening at the moment. Civilians are dying. People don't have access to water. The food supplies are running out. And it's really catastrophic of what is happening. Somebody has to stop this madness. So I'm really expecting more of that. We need even those that the military we got, like Bayraktars from Turkey. They're now extremely effective of actually destroying the Russian military equipment. The NLAWs that we got from Britain, we use them for burning Russian tanks. The Stingers are used a lot as well. These are the supplies which are helping Ukrainian armed forces to fight back. We need more of that. But apparently, all these people who are fleeing the country, they never wanted to leave the country. We are fine, our economy has finally started growing. We started to recovering from COVID, and already the cost of war was so high. For 8 years, Russia waging war in Ukraine. It was estimated that the damage for 8 years was already $280 billion. But what has happened here during last week? I don't know how many years we need to rebuild the country. So much civilian infrastructure. Most of the airports are destroyed. Bridges are blown up. Buildings are destroyed. This is just unbelievable what's happening. So much damage. We're just looking at this and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see. And we are still, a very poor country in the middle of Europe, and now getting all this destruction. Our government has submitted an official applications to speed up the process of European integration. That was already supported. The official process has started. But, it's more of a symbolic support. Integration into the European Union sometimes takes years and years and years. But that is a very important message that the EU can send to Ukraine. They really have to say, yes, you belong to the European Union, and we approve your right to start then negotiations and start the admission process. But what we really need, we need to be quickly admitted there. I mean, would be a very strong message to Putin,
What about NATO? I mean, what do you feel like NATO should be doing?
Look, I'm really in favor of the no-fly zone, because this is the only protection we can get. We can fight the Russians on the ground. Their air capabilities are much stronger, and it's difficult to sustain without having the airspace covered. I understand the complications, and I understand why NATO is demonstrating constraint. I fully realize it. But what else can we do? We should have been accepted into NATO back in 2007, or our right to join NATO should have been accepted, and we should have been there long time ago, because that was the only solution for us. And we were communicating that to the world many, many years. In 2008, they attacked Georgia, and it was already a clear sign that they're going to come to Ukraine. But NATO, it fell on a deaf ears. Russians convinced French and Germans not to accept it. But that was the only solution. That was the only protection for us, to be next door to this belligerent neighbor who wants to invade us. We had no other protection but to be seeking membership there. And this is what people believe. NATO membership prospect right now, it probably has 80% of support within Ukraine. I mean, no doubt about it. All people want to be part of NATO. That's the reason why all the Eastern European countries joined NATO. They wanted to have some protection and security, and this is, clearly explained. And NATO is to be frank, it could be the decision could be made very quickly to accept Ukraine into. They could have done it long time ago, and just it was in good times when when Turkey and Greece was accepted in the kind of first wave of the expansion of NATO in the 50s. But more important, what we are looking at is actually the expansion which happened after the collapse of the Warsaw Pact and the collapse of the Soviet Union, of how the countries of Eastern Europe were able to transform their economies by joining NATO and then joining the EU. It was a clear path for us, because we want to build a democracy, want to live in a strong and prosperous country. And you see, it was something which was nagging Putin. He just couldn't accept that there is a country next door, which will always been for a long time under Moscow, which is trying to build a democratic society, which wants to be part of the European Union. They attacked us in 2014 when we were kind of a neutral country. Yanukovych, who was a ruthless kleptocrat and escaped the country in 2014, he actually had it enshrined that we're neutral. But Russians attacked us. They grabbed Crimea. They manufactured an artificial conflict in Donbass and invaded back then. And so it was not about NATO. It was just they couldn't accept that there is a country next door which Russians are watching and seeing. And that was an existential threat for Putin, because if we could succeed, his regime could no longer sustain. He would fall. And this is something he wanted to destroy. And therefore he attacked. And his ideas, his mad, insane ideas about rebuilding the Soviet Union, and about
Right.
this.
It's just wild. This
Yeah.
it reminds me of Trump's "Make America Great Again." It's like, the reason the Soviet Union is gone is because people didn't want it anymore. They
Exactly.
wanted democracy, they wanted human rights, they wanted free speech, they wanted freedom of the press, they wanted the chance to make their own futures and not be handed some sort of job that didn't suit them. I mean, that's why the Soviet Union is gone. And so trying to bring it back is an exercise in futility. I mean, the Ukrainians have already experienced freedom. This is not like, even Belarus, which is still Lukashenko, is with Putin, but the Belarusian people are sick of Lukashenko. They want freedom, they want human rights, they want freedom of the press, they want Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. Like, they don't want Lukashenko anymore. Like, the world is not at a point where it wants to be in that system anymore.
By the way, speaking of the Belarus, there are many people in Belarus who fled the country in 2020, and they live in Ukraine. and they've been recording messages addressing the Belarus military not to invade Ukraine, because there is now a big contingent on the border, and they may actually come into the country.
The Belarusian military is now on the border as well.
Yes, they already, many of them are already involved, because I've seen the pictures of the Russian military, and there are guys with badges with the Belarus flag already. But they are talking about a large contingent of about 30,000 people. There is a tank battalion there or something, which was on the border. But I think the Belarus people have disrupted the railway system to actually arrange the logistics. And they were appealing to those people, because many people from Belarus who were in opposition, they fled either to Poland, to Lithuania, or to Ukraine, and they've been maintaining their connections and their the fight against the regime of Lukashenko, and this is so they were appealing. Today, I've seen the videos. They were appealing to the Belarus people not to support the Putin's war against Ukraine and just stay put in the country and not cross the border.
Yeah, because essentially, if they attack, they're attacking their own people. If there's Belarusians that are living in Ukraine,
exactly.
So this has been an unbelievable interview. Is there anything else that you want people to know out there about what's going on? I guess the last thing that I would say is the West, especially the U.S., has a tendency to like to stay out of things. And what would you kind of say about the implications for the U.S.? Why should people in the United States care about what's happening?
Look, I think Ukraine is now at the front line of protecting the democracy and protecting the freedom. And these are fundamental values for the Americans. This is how the American nation has been built. And what is taking place is therefore, it resonates with so many people in America. That's the reason we see this support. And therefore, we need more of that support. We need more financial aid. We need more stringent sanctions. We really need a global coalition which will be led by the countries of the free world against the dictator Putin, so that he is constrained and leaves and withdraws from Ukraine.
Okay, it's all so important. I want to bring in our other guests, but before I let you go, is there anything else that you think it's really important that people should know that are watching this show today?
Look, what is important, I want to tell you and assure you that Ukrainians will keep on fighting. And I think this resistance is for a long goal, unless something dramatic going to happen or Putin is going to die suddenly. And then we really are praying for that and hoping that it's going to happen. And we all will be celebrating that. Nevertheless, in the current circumstances, the situation is extremely difficult. And there are more troops coming over to Kiev. The city might be encircled, but it keeps on fighting, and the resistance is very strong.
Well, thank you, Vasil. It's so good to just hear how much resistance there are, and it's so inspiring. Looking at the all of the ways people are resisting, from the farmer dragging the Russian tank with the tractor, to the people changing the street signs, to people getting up and fighting. I saw an interview yesterday with a Russian lady who's probably like in her 60s, and she's telling the news how she made Molotov cocktails. And like, how do you figure out how to do that? She goes, I Googled it. Like, it's amazing seeing all the creative ways that people are resisting right now. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. And I want to send like my support to you, to your family, to the Ukrainians. I think there are a lot of people in the US that do care and do recognize that this is an unbelievable threat to our democratic order as a whole, and an attack on democracy.
Yes, absolutely, Samantha. Thanks a lot for having me.
It's been a pleasure, and get some sleep.
I will. Thank you.
Okay, good night. Wow. So that was Vasil. Coming into us from Ukraine on the ground. It sounds like from him that the fighting is getting worse. There are more tanks coming in. The city of Kiev may be encircled, and the situation is just getting profoundly worse. The humanitarian situation is getting worse in terms of people on the ground lacking water, lacking food, lacking basic necessities. And the international community really needs to step up to provide this. And we have to find some way to limit the strikes that are happening from the air, because that's where Russia is incurring most of its casualties. An unbelievable person. He's also the co-founder of the Ukraine Crisis Media Center, and it was late for him. So we're now going to bring in our next guest, Roman, who is also from Ukraine, but is now currently in Poland, and he is heading a foundation to help with Ukrainian refugees that are coming into Poland. Roman, welcome to the show.
Hello everyone.
Hi. So what are you hearing? You're in Warsaw now, correct?
Yes, I'm in Warsaw, and we're fighting even here against Russians, because in other ways, because we help people, we help refugees from Ukraine.
And in what way are you fighting there? What do you mean by that?
It's like for me, the most important thing to make families happy. It's like Ukrainian families, because men are fighting in Ukraine, but women and children are here in Poland, and they should be safe, because their husbands are fighting, and they should know that everything is okay with their families. And here in Poland, we are fighting against Russian business. We are fighting against Russian ambassador. Yeah, we want today and yesterday we protested. We protested in Poland here that Russian ambassador should be sent out.
So you're saying that the Russian ambassador should be kicked out of the country? Is that what you're advocating for?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So are you seeing massive protests in Warsaw?
Oh, yes, it's very massive protest, because Polish people remember Soviet Union. They remember Polish communist country, and they don't want to have the same history, and they support Ukraine. I think their support is very important, because most refugees are here in Poland.
So what are you seeing in terms of the refugee crisis within Poland?
It's like Polish people. They try to give them flats. They try to give them rooms to live, and they try to give them food, and they support in many ways Polish people and Ukrainian people in Poland, and Belarusians in Poland. We buy vests, helmets, and send to Ukraine to support our army.
That's unbelievable. And tell us more about your foundation. What exactly is your foundation doing?
It's the page on the internet, and it allows people to find the threat, and to find people, Polish people, who help Ukrainians, refugees, and it is a very easy way to find the threat. Yeah.
What would you like the international community to know?
I think what is very important, that Ukraine should be a member of European Union, and I want that NATO would support Ukraine if Russia starts to bombing Ukrainian cities. It's like or Kiev. I hope that NATO will support us.
Are you worried at all? I mean, you're living in Poland. That that some people are referring to Putin almost as almost like Hitler. Of you give him an inch and he takes a mile. Is there any worry within Poland that Hitler might continue moving, or that Putin might continue moving if he is able to take Ukraine?
Of course, it's not a mistake because Putin is a Hitler, is the Hitler of our time because he's crazy and people are afraid in Poland that it's like it's time to fight against Russia and win this war and we will do it because for in and here in Poland I don't sleep well because I have family in Ukraine. I have friends in Ukrainian army, and I support them. But and for me, it's very difficult. It's very difficult. I sleep 3 or 4 hours per day, and it's like I cannot sleep more.
So your family is still in Ukraine?
Yes, yes.
And can you tell us what's going on with your family?
It's like I don't have contact with my father, and I think maybe he fights against Russian
Wow.
in our village, or maybe he's preparing to fight with the Russians because my village is near the Belarusian border.
Wow. So you haven't been able to contact your father?
No, no.
Wow. And so they're right near the Belarusian border. That's unbelievable. What do you feel like, the average person can do to help the situation right now?
For me, I'm in Poland, and my goal is to make everything possible to help people in Ukraine because they are fighting, and we can do that. We can inform Russians. We have time for this, and yeah, we do it. We send messages to Russians that okay, hey, your government is stupid. You cannot support them and you should fight against them. Yeah, and
So you're sending, just to clarify, Roman, so you're sending messages to Russians via social
yeah,
media, or how are you
yeah,
reaching out to them?
yeah, through social media.
Interesting. And what has the response been?
It's like some people don't agree with us, but some people start asking us what's going on because
Hmm.
some people don't know what's going on in Ukraine. It's propaganda. It's very big propaganda in Russia.
Wow. So it sounds like there's a big need for people to really help
Yes,
Russians understand that what Putin's doing is essentially war crimes and just
yes,
murder of civilians.
it's terrorism. Really, it's terrorism. He is crazy. He is doing very crazy thing.
So are you
No, for me, I don't understand it.
so you're encouraging Russians to rise up against Putin?
Yes, exactly. Because and even people who are afraid because they sometimes answer that okay, we cannot do it because the police will attack us, and then we tell them, guys, we have war. It's not time to be afraid. We should fight against this terrorist.
So people are afraid of being arrested if they rise up against the Russians.
Yes, exactly. And
Against
for
the government, excuse me.
yes, and for us, and we try to ride them and pursue them to fight against Putin.
And you had positive responses of people who said, "Yes, I want to fight against him. This is ridiculous."
I have friend because I'm working with refugees and my friend he is sending messages to Russians. Yeah, and he showed me the picture and his correspondence with one girl from Vladivostok, and this girl went to the mother of the soldier, of the Russian soldier, and this girl told her that her son is in Ukraine,
Wow.
and yeah and mother started to be interested. Why? Yeah, we have mm, some consequences, yeah, positive.
That's great. I mean, I think it's just so important to show, I call this the systems level and the individual level, but that individual is like one individual at a time can really make a difference.
Yes,
Um, and that's amazing that you're doing that.
Yes, we should do it because now Russia is crazy. It's like Germany during World War. Uh, we should win. We should win.
Yeah. It's something that's ironic is that Facebook has now blocked the ability for you to advertise political content outside of your country. So if I try to get this episode in Russia, it won't be allowed because they don't want to influence foreign governments. But the irony is that's actually where that's where content is needed on social media, is within these areas that don't have access to that kind of information, which, shows how, Facebook's restrictions and other technology platforms restrictions, they're designed to help, but they can actually hurt.
Yeah.
So amazing, Roman. Is there anything that any place that people can donate or anything, any way that people can support your work in the United States?
I think people should donate to Ukrainian initiatives, and I can tell you I should thank Americans because they support even me. Yeah, my friend sent me a message from Ocean City. I went to Ocean City to the program for students. I met them. There are many Americans, great people, and they send me messages with support. It's like I'm very thankful.
That's amazing. Roman, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, and I also want to, express my my hope, my support. I hope that your dad is okay. It sounds like he is an awesome dude and is, out there trying to, fight off the Russians like everybody else, or like the brave Ukrainians. And he sounds like a brave and amazing man. And so are you. And in terms of the work that you're doing, I'm really trying to mobilize Polish citizens to do everything they can to send support to Ukraine, and also to get to try to counter the disinformation of the Russians and get them to rise up. It's really unbelievable what you're doing.
Yes, we try to do everything what we can do.
Amazing. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. And I hope you have a good night, sleep well, keep in touch and let me know how I can help.
Thank you, Americans. You are great.
Thanks. Take care, Roman. Good night.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Well, that was Roman Corbett, originally from the Ukraine, but now living in Warsaw and running a foundation to help Ukrainian refugees to find places to live in Poland. And he's also mobilizing support from the Polish people for Ukraine, as well as mounting individual efforts to try to counter Russian disinformation and to tell the Russian people what exactly is going on. Again, we can see just all these amazing individuals saying, what is it that I can do to help? One person really can make a difference. Before I bring in our last guest, I just want to thank our sponsor, Trillium Creative Solutions, founded by rogue leader Tori Graff, one of the most amazing women that I know. They do learning and development plans, websites, all sorts of different things within the L&D area, and they're unbelievable. We'll put a link in the chat, but you should definitely check out the work that they do, as well as our sponsor, Stream Inspectors. Every time I say thank you, Zach, that is the amazing sponsors and producers behind this show, and Empower Global, which does diversity and inclusion training for global companies. So now I want to bring in our last guest, my friend, Tomas. Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, hello. Hi, Samantha.
Nice to see you, Tomas.
Nice to see you too.
So, Tomas, can you just explain to everyone where you're from?
So I'm from Poland. I'm actually originally from Eastern Poland, which is on the forefront of the, I would say, help with supplies and, refugee acceptance operations, right? But I live in Warsaw right now, in the capital of Poland.
So, what are you seeing in terms of, and what is your family seeing in terms of the refugees that are crossing the border to Poland?
Well, the influx has started very quickly. Right now, there is a tens of kilometers of a line at the border, so there's a lot of people coming, needing help, and there's actually lots of procedures changing to let them in quickly. So Poland's reacted very quickly to this crisis. We're actually worried that we won't be able to handle that in a proper manner, because we are expecting that there may be millions of refugees coming in the next
Wow.
couple of weeks.
Wow. No, what is the infrastructure right now like set up like in order to be able to process all these refugees?
Well, some of it was set up even before the invasion, as far as I know. Lots of halls, stations were converted into places that can house many people. But what's most interesting is it's something that we probably even ourselves didn't think would happen, is that there is thousands of people who just even literally come to the border with their own cars, offering to to basically take some people straight from the border with their
So
bags and
Polish,
just
so
take them
Polish
to the
people
nearest
have come
cities.
with, so Polish,
Yeah, simply.
it's amazing, just said, come home with me. I've got space for you.
Yeah. Even my own family, actually my brother's wife's family, to be precise, set up very quickly their home. They live outside the city, and in their house and also facilities around their house are now accepting Ukrainians. So it's they've prepared actually place. I think they're currently hosting around 22 people, including 8 women, kids, mostly women and kids. And they've also very quickly started remodeling spaces available to them to host more people.
How are the, I mean, how are they doing? How are these refugees doing that have come over the border?
Well, so far they are good. This seems to be the first wave of refugees. So they don't come from places like Kharkiv, or they have not traveled the whole of Ukraine. Most of them actually come from the Western Ukraine. So mm, they are, taking preventative measures before bombs start hitting their
Right.
homes.
So what you're expecting to happen is that there's going to be a kind of mass exodus now from Kharkiv and Kiev and those regions all the way across Ukraine to get to Poland. Is that what you're thinking is going to
For
happen?
sure. Yeah, I think so. It's the situation is probably just going to get worse. So the next months are going to be difficult. Weeks and months are going to be difficult for the country.
And is the Polish government doing anything like on an official level?
Oh yes, for sure. The Polish government was pressing, the Western countries to wake up, because like how we feel is that the West was for many, especially biggest countries like France and Germany, for many years they were very happy to deal with Russia, and of course Germany is now highly criticized for not having seen what could happen, and running this rhetoric that you can always you can always talk with Putin, you can always do business, you can always find a way to move ahead, right? And that's exactly what Putin has been taken advantage of.
Mhm.
So we've tried to advocate as soon as crisis happened, and probably partly because of our government's in this case strong action. It helped for sure unify the West. And as we know the Western response, how hard it was and how united it was. First time in a long time, that was probably the biggest issue in the last couple of years, that there was no unity.
Right. I mean that's what they're saying basically about this sanctions package and the no and the banning them from the airspace is that the ability to get 27 nations unified to decide that they're going to move ahead with this, especially considering Germany's reliance on Russian oil, was pretty magnanimous.
Yes, actually, you can see the initial response of Germany to their to the Ukrainian ambassador, where he basically, as the reports say, he had tears or he was crying, after he heard that, what doesn't make sense to help because Ukraine will fall, in the next hours or so.
Oh my gosh, it's just shocking. In terms of the question I asked Roman, what is the sentiment like again of, well, first of all, I think it's so ironic that Germany were the ones that didn't really understand, considering their history with Hitler, which also was like, what? Hello, like
Well,
you've been through this,
yes and no.
guys, come
Yes
on.
and no, because for them it was a good situation, just moving on with Putin and actually having access to resources, and having a better deal for those resources. Down the road, possibly the ability to open their heavy industry and in the east of Russia or wherever. There is a possibility. So, for Russians, it was also a great deal because it allowed them to push the Americans out of Europe, right? So that's why we feel like this is pretty much a war of like Russia against the US in this case. And yeah, just so happened that, this alliance that was kind of forming up for many years was immediately broken. And, Putin has done what, nobody else could have done in like 30 or 40 years.
Wow. So, what are your thoughts on, is there fear on your end that Putin might just keep going and take over, decide to invade Poland? And also, with regards to that, when we were chatting, just to inform people about the issue with Poland's military.
Well, yes, the Polish military, it's an ongoing problem. Like I was just listening to a military expert saying that Poland has had trouble buying RPGs for the last 20 years. So, like, we're seeing how effective those manpads are against Russians, against Russian heavy equipment. And, we weren't even able to equip the army with them, throughout so many years over different governments that were changing, right? So the situation is, of course, bad, but this is it's as much as tragic as it is. This is like probably yeah, the event that's gonna help the most our security going forward. If only nothing, nothing unexpected, such as nuclear strike doesn't happen, it's really going to elevate our ability to defend ourselves. So of course now we'll see all the guns pretty much from the West pointed at Russia. I don't see how that could be, um, um, devastating for us in terms of security. I think it's going to be very good. It's just sad to hear. It's really sad to hear that this is through the blood of our eastern friends, Ukrainians, right?
Yeah. Can you? But my what I'm wondering though is, like, say Putin were to keep going and decide to invade Poland, the Polish military is not equipped to fend off um, Russia, is it?
Oh, I don't think it is. It's not. But I mean, of course, we're in NATO, and we're just seeing forces from different countries being deployed right now in Poland. So, of course, proclaiming war against NATO is like against Poland is like proclaiming war against the
Against
whole of
NATO
NATO.
alliance.
And part of the
Right.
problem is, like, for example, as the previous guests have said, they were asking, for us to open this, like NATO, to open this no-fly zone, or to send the ambassadors back home, or to, like do really aggressive actions against Russia. So I'm afraid, as much as we would love to, to help Ukrainians, we can't just send our tanks over the eastern border, because, that would just hugely escalate the situation. And this just shows like how kind of what kind of a tragic situation Ukrainians are in right now.
Is there any mobilization of Polish people going over to fight with the Ukrainian army?
Oh yes, there's a lot of rumors about the Foreign Legion, and lots of soldiers or people with military experience flying over to Poland and then heading to Western Ukraine to organize there. But of
Wow.
course, it's going to be hard to organize these people really well and equip them with properly, right? Like, I haven't even seen a website that would let them communicate and and then group in some organized or forms of resistance. So right now, I'm afraid it's too late for all of that. It's just like it's too late for parts of Ukrainian army. As far as I know, the mobilization was called too late. Because Zelensky didn't want to provoke Putin earlier ahead of time to
Interesting.
invade. So that's unfortunate. Ukraine would have been way more stronger had they been able to
They'd
call full
mobilize.
mobilization. Right.
What are your thoughts on Zelensky?
He's doing a wonderful job. We would like, as being Polish, I would love to have a president like him. It's just like an example for years of what a president should be, how he should behave for his own people.
What is Polish intelligence getting that, you've mentioned that Polish intel is quite good about what's happening on the ground, better than the US and other sources. Can you tell us like what you're seeing in the Polish papers that's not appearing in the US?
Well, we have, because of ties with Ukraine, lots of our military experts, strategists, have direct access to people in Ukraine. They have friends there. They have information from the satellites, or not a military experts. I don't know how they extract it, but when we listen to it, it's very interesting information, and in terms of the movement of forces from which, like, today is day 6, if I'm right. So starting from yesterday, the information is unfortunately not as good as before, right? Like we are seeing Ukrainian front lines and defense lines being broken. And many, especially in the south and in the east, around the Donbas area, and over Crimea, where today the Cherson, I think, I'm not sure the pronunciation, but the city was taken, and they have crossed the Dnieper River line, which is a very important point of this defense. So unfortunately, from those two sides, from the east and from the south, the Russians are advancing, and they have prevailed over the critical lines of defense. And the situation in basically one of the most interesting things we're hearing from that is that it seems like the South was well prepared for years, and as many have said, Russians were getting ready to build a kind of connect their newly acquired Crimea with Donbas, and they've been getting ready for this for years. And one Polish,
the Donbas were ready to fight Russia. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying that Russians have been preparing for years to kind of connect their newly acquired Crimea territory, right, with Donbas, with the east, and to take it, kind of cut it away from Ukraine. But seems like the operation in the north is completely unprepared. It's almost amateur, right? So it feels like some people are laughing, that analysts, that it's like they knew what to do, the generals what to do at the end, somebody else came, maybe Putin, and told them, hey, and you got to hit there too, right? And that's what they did. But it looked pathetic in the beginning. But of course, this is Russian war machine. Probably, I mean, shouldn't be underestimated. And I think once they're, getting their full gear, eventually they are probably going to, well, most likely going to prevail.
It's really staggering and just so sad. One more question is, can you explain why that border with Poland is so important? The border between Ukraine and Poland?
Well, this is the border, the western border of Ukraine, the western border of NATO. So it's basically the border of the Western world. Yes, so that is why it's so important.
But also, isn't it the fact that there's very few, because the Russians are invading from the east, the south, and the north, that the only area to get supplies in is through Poland, correct?
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. You could say, and yeah, it's a legitimate claim that West Ukraine could easily belong to the Western world, and we would love to have them here. The reality right now, maybe it just may get way more difficult. But like getting down to what's happening, of course, like the southern end. Southwestern side of Ukraine has a very difficult terrain. There is mountains there, Carpathian mountains, so that the only way to quickly get them supplied is through the Polish border.
So important. Is there any worry that the Russians will try to block that border off and choke Ukraine?
So far, it looks like they don't have enough force for that. And of course, there's speculations that they were also somewhat afraid of NATO. Well, there were some talks about that no-fly zone, but there's also some pressure a lot of pressure from the West. Yes, I mean they could do that, and they had some in the area where they could strike. They had some light forces that could create some panic in those areas, but so far it hadn't happened. It didn't happen.
So Thomas, is there anything else that you feel like it's really important for people to know?
Well, just stay hopeful, I guess, and be united with Ukrainians who are just doing a really heroic work right now.
Cool. Thank you so much, Thomas. And also, there's people can support financially your brother-in-law, right? Who's taking in, or your sister? I'm lost, but who's taking in Ukrainian refugees? There's some kind of fundraiser. Is that correct?
Yes. So there is a crowdfunding website. So I'll pass over the link, and if you'd like, we can post it in the comments or in the description. And of course, so far, if I remember right, there was about $8,000 gathered from that fundraiser. So the goal was double that, but well, it's really like that. What it comes down to is that they have 20-something people right now. And it's going to cost somewhere around probably $300 a month to support these people per person, right? So maybe more.
Which is actually not that much, frankly.
That's not that much. And they started actually locating more people in their friends' apartments in the direct vicinity, and also even doing quick remodeling of the facilities around, so that the more they can take, the better.
Amazing. It's so I applaud their heroic work, and again, my wishes are with you and your family and everything that's going on there. And I think at least me and a lot of the people I know do stand united with Ukraine.
Great.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Tomas.
Thank you for inviting me.
It was a pleasure having you. Well, that was Tomas Dzido, and he is from Poland, right near the border, where many of the refugees are flowing from Ukraine. I think something that he said that was really important is that they're only right now in Poland experiencing the first wave of refugees, which aren't actually the refugees that have necessarily been in harm's way in combat. As we heard earlier from Vasil, they tried to get out and it took 12 hours and they essentially got nowhere. So getting out of Kiev and those areas is extremely dangerous right now in order to travel, and the traffic is crazy. But I think what he's saying is there's going to be another huge wave of refugees that are coming more from the eastern part of Ukraine to the Polish border, and that we need to be equipped to be able to help them. We will post the link of that crowdfunding page. If you have, $1 to contribute to help support these families that are fleeing war, it's just so incredibly important. We also had Vasil on our show, and we had Roman. What an amazing lineup tonight. And I think what really becomes clear for me is the heroic nature of the Ukrainian people. They are fighting as hard as they can with very little. It almost reminds you of the Maccabees of, or Israel repelling, all these countries during the 5-day war. Unbelievable heroism. The other thing that I think becomes really apparent is that there were some people that thought that Putin was a rational actor. And I think what becomes so clear is that he is not, is that this was not strategic. It has made him a pariah in the lens of the world. It has now forever made Ukraine hate Russians. It is going to create anti-Russian sentiment within the United States, within the West. It's going to drive countries towards NATO. It crippled the Russian economy. It doesn't really seem like anything he did actually was strategic at all. It's really just an old power grab and land grab, because he's obsessed with Ukraine and wants to reignite the Soviet Union, which from a practical sense, people don't want anymore. I think those are things that are really clear that came out tonight. And I think the other thing that's really important to know is that the situation's only going to get worse. As Tomas was just saying, that Russian forces have been able to break through some of the Ukrainian lines in different regions. Things are getting worse around Kiev, around Kharkiv, around a lot of the big areas. And it's only going to get worse from here. And we need to be able to help as the international community, as the West. So there are some things that you can do. We're going to post this link in the chat about how to help Ukraine now. So you can obviously donate. There's lots of other NGOs that are really working to help Ukrainians on the ground, that are funding the Ukrainian military, lots of really good organizations to donate to. You can also join a protest in your city. There have been protests in Prague, in Berlin, in the US, in Warsaw. Go show your support for the Ukrainian people. Go show, if you are in a NATO country, that you want them to enforce a no-fly zone. There's also a petition, which is also in that link, to ask your country to pressure NATO, if it's a NATO country, to do that no-fly zone to prevent Russian forces from doing further airstrikes. There's also people, they need translators. So if you do speak Russian, people need translators right now, or Ukrainian, to help there. Post in social media, retweet, share, call your congressional staff. If you are in the United States, call your member of Congress, your senator, say that you support a no-fly zone over Ukraine, say that you support providing as much help as possible to the Ukrainians. And then to host Ukrainians that are fleeing. Obviously, this doesn't pertain as much to people in the United States, but for people in Europe to volunteer to host Ukrainians, just like Tomas's family did. There are so many things that you can do, and I know that it's really easy to feel helpless in times like this, but the best thing to counter helplessness is to take action. And this is a unbelievable threat to the democratic world order. That's all that I can say. It is an abrogation, a violation, and we have to do whatever we can to stop it. All right, so thank you so much for watching tonight. If you found this content valuable, please support us on Patreon. For less than the price of a Starbucks every month, for less than $3 a month, you can support us and support this important journalism and important content. So we'll post the Patreon link in the chat. Also, if you like this content and you think it needs to get out there, please share it. Vasil, what he was saying about what's going on there is really important. The news is not keeping up to this right now because there's so much going on and there's not that many people on the ground because it is so dangerous. So having that insider information is, I hadn't heard a lot of the things that he was talking about. So please share this episode on Facebook, and also just hit that subscribe button on YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, thank you so much for watching or listening to this week's episode of Samantha Politics, and we'll see you soon. Take care.